thank all of you so much for being here and all of you for participating in this process. We've had over a year of meetings and additional to the community meetings. There's been smaller meetings, so we really appreciate everyone's input along the way, and this process will very much continue. I want to thank our co-chairs again of the CAG, Carter Kraft, Housing Authority Commissioner LaTrenda Ross, and Councilman Bala, who's also serving as a co-chair of the CAG. Councilwoman Fisher is coming to join us tonight. I want to thank, we have the Executive Director of the Housing Authority, Mark Recco, is here with us, the Chair of the Planning Board, Gary Holtzman, Kurt Gardner, who's North Hudson Sewage Authority Commissioner, is with us, and I apologize if I've missed anyone else, but really, really appreciate everyone coming out tonight. So tonight we are approaching choosing and selecting the preferred alternative. When we started almost a year ago with a lot of these community meetings, some of you probably were at those meetings where we had a community meeting on the criteria and what we were going to use, what was going to be the criteria for choosing the preferred alternative. And so obviously it's going to include cost, but it's also very much going to include obviously the reducing the flood risk reduction, and also views, traffic impacts, design, all of those things are going to go into making this final decision. So the DEP team is going to be really walking you through the screening criteria for all three alternatives today. This project includes the resist, delay, store, and discharge, and they're designed to protect from two types of flooding: that coastal flooding that brought in with Sandy 500 million gallons of water into our city, and also protecting from those heavy rain events that hit us just on Monday and hopefully will not be hitting us in the next couple of days. So they're going to be, in addition to talking about the screening criteria, showing you some of the flood models for the rain events as well, and the plans to really protect from that. So this plan, as you all know, we have $230 million. The bulk of the funding will go towards the resist element. But we will, through this process, we're creating a master plan for our city and for the region, and I hope some of you picked up, there's a lot of city projects that are kind of integral to this that the city was already working on, including the Southwest Park, 7th and Jackson Park, BASF, we're in negotiations, just had a meeting on that today. The pump will be completed by this fall that will be able to pump out 40 million gallons a day. There's a City Hall demonstration project. We've developed design guidelines for buildings to help you understand the options for your buildings as well. So we're moving ahead on parallel tracks. So obviously trying to make sure that we protect from the coastal storm surge, but also the heavy rain events. This project includes working on that as well. And finally, before I turn it over to Dave Rosenblatt, the Assistant Commissioner, I just want to remind everyone, the threat is real. Last year, we had the threat of Hurricane Joaquin that was predicted to reach us, which was predicted to be worse than Sandy. I just heard that there's potentially a storm brewing 5 days out. We can't really know, but like every year, we have the threat of having a major hurricane hit our community. That brought in with Sandy 500 million gallons, and I never want us to go through what we all went through when Sandy hit us, and so that's why I'm excited about this. This is a tremendous opportunity for our city. And I want to assure, I completely understand that there are residents who are really concerned about what's going to happen with the design right next to your building and what the impact could be possibly on your property values. Like, we understand that design is extremely important, and I want to assure you that design process is going to continue over the next 18 to 24 months. So as we move towards a preferred alternative, then we're going to be working even harder on finalizing that design and making this as beautiful as possible. So the concept is to make it beautiful, but obviously to protect our city from the devastation that we faced with Sandy and having that happen again. So I thank you again all for being here, being a part of this process, and continuing to be a part of this process. And I want to thank the state and their entire team, Dewberry and the designers. They've all worked really, really hard, and we really appreciate all of their work. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave Rosenblatt. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Zimmer. Welcome to the expanded Citizens Advisory Group meeting tonight. Before I get started, I have to say this. Alexis pointed this out to me, and I agree with her. I was experiencing some free-floating anxiety tonight before the meeting. As I walked down those steps, I sat in one of the chairs, and I'm looking around, and I couldn't figure out what it was. Alexis and I started talking about it, and I realized this room is the scene of every chemistry, physics, math course I've ever taken, whose exam I ever failed. It looks just like this. You know it. Flip up those desktops. It's the recurring nightmare that just won't go away. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So at the last time we met, 2 weeks ago, we showed you 3 alternatives for a flood control project for the project area. We showed you that through modeling, they all significantly reduced the flooding in Hoboken, Weehawken, and parts of Jersey City. Tonight, what we want to show you are the criteria, the data that we're going to use in selecting the preferred alternative. Of the numbers you see on the matrix, and you have the matrix in your hand, it's that long sheet of paper you were given. Don't read ahead. Don't. I know you want to look at certain subjects. Try not to. But you'll recognize some of the criteria, some of the numbers, as being a required part of the environmental review process, or NEPA, which establishes a set of conditions that we must assess in a highly technical way in order to get us the preferred alternative and the record of decision. These environmental factors, such as noise, impacts to species, historic property losses, are part of any standard alternative analysis. Another subset of these criteria and data you will see are based on our discussions over the past year or so. These are quality of life metrics, the view shed of New York City, the park space along the rivers or in the city, not limiting or the access to the waterfront. All quality of life criteria that we also looked at and quantified. You will also see for the first time project costs related to each of the alternatives. All of these numbers are quantitative estimates. They're based on months of data collection. They've been independently reviewed by third parties. We are confident that these are the best numbers that we can possibly have at this time. You will also notice that, because I know you're looking at that form, there's no ranking. There's no 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for the criteria for each of the alternatives. We're not ranking these alternatives tonight. We are not leaving here with a preferred alternative. But as you go through the matrix, you'll see some numbers. You'll see hundreds of millions of dollars of costs. You'll see impacts that some of you may not think acceptable. Those will go into the selection process. I think some of them become apparent as to what's going to happen with the alternative. We'll go through that. I'm trying this on my iPhone, if you don't know, and I keep on pushing things with my fingers, so I have to go slowly. All right, so I was going to try this. Another way to look at the way we're going to use this matrix is similar to the way that you would buy a car, maybe. You look at 10 models, and you go through Consumer Report and Motor Trend. All right, you have your 5 models, 3 models, whatever you're looking at, 10. And you start looking at miles per hour, or excuse me, miles per gallon, maybe miles per hour, some of you, in 10 seconds. You're looking at towing capacity, cargo capacity, kid capacity, color, the type of use that you want to use the car for. And you write all those numbers down. You write all those numbers down. And then at the end of the day that the night before you're going to go select a car, you take all those numbers, and what you wind up doing, and you know you do it, is you've ranked them, but when you go to buy the car the next day, what you say is, I like this one. It works. It's the right color. It fits me. I have this gut feel that this is the best one. I've looked at all the data, and I want this one. Particularly when cars are close. Well, same thing here. It's more than a gut feel, of course. We've looked at a lot of data. But in the end, we're not ranking these. We're not using the data points to assign a number to an alternative. That's not the way this is going to go. Did that help or hurt? Come on. All right. Okay. All right. So the purpose tonight is to show you how the criteria that have been developed, with your help, of course, will be used to compare these alternatives with each other and with the no-build option. To show you the schedule for the process, which will lead to the designation of a preferred alternative, to solicit your comments, Your comment periods are not over. There's still an opportunity for you tonight to look at what we're presenting and say, hey, wait a second. You forgot the color. You forgot this criteria. Come on. We need this included. We have time to include that. We don't think that's going to be the case because you've been sitting with us over these many months and helping select the criteria. You would have called it by now. But who knows? Maybe we've missed something collectively. So we're going to take your comments on the matrix. We will be back on September 8th to unveil the preferred alternative. So tell your friends, come back September 8th. Now, before I pass this over to Arnold Block to lay out the logistics of tonight's meeting, I just want to go through this again. How many people are brand new to this meeting series? Okay, I see about 6, 7 people. Great. Welcome. What we want to do tonight is, again, focus on the matrix. If you have questions, or if anybody has questions about the project as a whole, what's been discussed in the past, we will have subject matter experts, project experts in the back after the formal part of the meeting. Ask your questions then. They'll be able to give you individual answers and go into great detail with that. So with that, Arnold, please.
Thank you, Commissioner. Hi, I'm Arnold Block. I'm just here to help you get through the meeting and get as much understanding as you can get. And for us as well on the project team to hear what we can from you about reactions, questions, have we been clear? So that's very important for us. We have a certain format we wanted to follow. You've been hearing some introductions. You'll hear a little bit about project status in a moment, talk a little bit about the alternatives analysis. Then we're going to go into the evaluation criteria, which you've heard a few people mention already. The sheet that you have, I just wanted to have you look at it very briefly. On one side, it's mainly words. On the other side, you'll see a lot of numbers. They are the same criteria on both sides. There are 5 different categories, and then under that, a number of different criteria. So on one side, the one with the words, are definitions. And that will help you maybe to understand. You may want to read these more afterwards. It'll be tough to do it during the presentation. On the other side, with the numbers, are some of the values, some of the actual numbers that have been put in there to say how well this actually works against this criteria. You'll hear about that as the speakers go on tonight, but you might be able to follow along with them as you do this. You'll also have a chance afterwards, as the commissioner mentioned, to talk to some of the subject matter experts at different stations. And I'll tell you where they're going to be when we get through this. So we're going to present for about 40 minutes or so, do some takeaways and next steps. Then we're going to have a question and answer period for about 20 minutes. And I'm just going to say right now, and I'll remind you, that question and answer period, we'd like it to focus so much on the criteria themselves. Do you understand them? Is there something missing? Do we need to clarify something about them? issues related to the project as a whole. We would love for you if you would talk with people afterwards, because we need to learn a lot from you, and I think you need to learn a lot from us about the criteria and how these various alternatives are scoring. One thing I wanted to mention before I forget is that most of the time the lights will be on, and you'll be able to follow along if you'd like to on the sheet of paper. A couple of times, especially early on, we're going to turn the lights low because we want you to see the graphics very clearly. But it will be for a very short period of time, then we'll turn them back on again. So right now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Ken Spahn, who's going to talk about the project status, and I'll be back later. Thank you.
Thanks, Arnie. And good evening to everybody. Welcome to Stevens, and I really want to shout out a thank you to Dr. Blumberg and Stevens Institute for allowing us to come here. It's nice and cool in here. It's appreciated. Okay, so I'm going to go back a little bit. The U.S. Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, launched the Rebuild by Design competition after Sandy. And thanks to the good work of many people in this room, in June 2014, the Hudson River Project won an award of $230 million, and the mayor talked about that. And this presents a great opportunity for this region to implement a 4-part comprehensive urban water strategy to resist the threat of severe coastal storms and address heavy rainfall events by delaying inundation of an overburdened combined sewer storm system, temporarily storing rainfall, and discharging or mechanically moving away from rain from areas that flood. So the project build alternatives we'll talk about today all contain these 4 elements, and in fact, they all meet the purpose and need established at the beginning of this project. So once the funds were awarded from HUD, it triggered a legal requirement for a National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, review. And you can't spend federal dollars in the U.S. this magnitude without going through NEPA. So we're working on that right now, along with the feasibility study. A huge part of this review is to make sure that the public has the opportunity to be informed on the project, and that's why over the last year we've spent a lot of time meeting with stakeholders. So we started our feasibility process about a year ago. At this juncture here, the feasibility and EIS process is supposed to go in total about a year and 3/4. The record of decision, which is the actual final point for this, would be April, May 2017, but there will be points to comment for the public up until then. The DEP will then be advancing the project into the design phase in probably the spring of 2017, and then look to go into construction in December. And it's about a 3.5-year construction period. So zooming in on the current effort. In the last year, we have done a lot of outreach. The residents of Hoboken, Weehawken, and Jersey City have all been given a lot of their time to this effort, and it's appreciated. In total, we've had over 100 meetings with the public, stakeholders, or regulatory agencies just in the last year on this project. So to quickly review some of the larger public meetings, we had a kickoff back in June. Actually, the kickoff was at the Babbia. And then in August last year, there was a purpose and need meeting that basically was talking to the public about why it's needed and to answer the whys of this project. And then in September, we had a scoping meeting to review with the public how we're going to address the whys and kind of the hows of the project, how we move forward, developing the scope. Then we moved into the screening and criteria metrics in October, November, and this meeting was to develop screening criteria to help measure and understand what's important to the public, and aid in the development of concepts for the project. So the concept screening also formed the basis for what we're doing tonight with the alternatives analysis. And then concept development and screening, actually it was in December through February, where we first shared 5 different concepts for the resist alignments and also concepts for the delay store discharge, dealing with rainfall with the public. So looking beyond tonight, we're looking to wrap up the alternatives analysis in September. We are moving into draft EIS, where we'll be taking comments through the fall into November, December, and then ultimately looking to a final EIS and moving to a record of decision in March, April. And at that point, then you move into the design effort. So we've shared this slide before, and it's really useful. It's kind of a roadmap to the preferred alternative. During our scoping period, we developed a lot of data. We've also received a lot of feedback to help us develop concepts. And then we developed these concepts, as I mentioned, in December and February and shared them with the public. We actually got a lot of feedback in December on these concepts, where we went back and we changed them quite a bit. So the original 5 concepts ended up being different once we shared them with the public and took the feedback. So that was sort of the concept screening process. In February, we moved to 3 alternatives. We shared the screening process with everyone. We got feedback, and we went to what the 3 build alternatives, what the 3 alternatives for the resist piece we're moving forward with, and we also looked at the delay store discharge. So now we're on a road to get to 1 preferred alternative. And so the difference now between what we did back then is we've got a lot more data. As the commissioner mentioned, we've quantified things. We have a benefit cost analysis. We have cost estimates. We understand the impacts to the built and natural environment a lot more. We also did a lot of modeling too. So we've done rainfall modeling. We've done coastal storm modeling. So all that goes into the development of the preferred alternative. So this is just kind of a quick look. This was what we shared with folks back in December, and we called it like a traffic light map or a traffic light table. And it was very qualitative. This was good, fair, and poor rating of different things to kind of get from 5 concepts to 3 alternatives. And we used the red, yellow, and green. Now the thing you have in your hand is actually a lot more data and a lot more information. And we're going to be bringing you through it, starting at the top and working our way down. So you'll be able to see by the symbol on the side exactly where we are and what we're talking about as we go through it. So this is really kind of an important point in the life cycle of the project today. We have choices to make, and the choices will be made over the next month or so. And it's a point where we really need your feedback. We need to hear from you what your feeling is. Okay, so we'll be moving to flood risk reduction.
Yeah, let me just jump. My role at this point, is to point out that we're moving into the category of flood risk reduction. Now, at this point, it seems a little silly that I do that. But as we move further down into the presentation and go through the matrix, your minds are going to be spinning, possibly, and all I'm going to do is call attention to the fact that we have switched to a different category, and then just be aware of that. So you'll hear my voice every once in a while.
You needed somebody like this when you were in college in a room like this.
I did. I need somebody to tell me when the class was over, because I was asleep. So, same thing.
Okay. So flood risk reduction. We call these buckets, and these different categories, or buckets, categories, whatever. But the focus of this is on coastal storm surge and rainfall events. Coastal storm surge, or Sandy, has the potential of severe flood damage to a large population of the project area. We have 3 approaches to these different resist strategies that deal with the coastal storm surge. The delay store discharge addresses rainfall events that are also damaging and can be more frequent than these major coastal storms, can happen independent of the coastal storms. So it's important to note that we've got 3 alternatives for the resist piece, and there's just 1 approach for the delay store discharge. There just aren't as many options. So to compare the alternatives, we looked at criteria including coastal storm surge risk reduction for residents, the number of critical facilities. Like a FEMA term includes hospitals and fire stations as critical facilities. So your matrix will talk about the number of critical facilities protected. Also look at the ability to modify the systems to maybe a higher flood level. And then also overall capacity of delay store discharge, the delay store discharge system. So to get this information, we relied on the coastal storm model and also the rainfall modeling, and Rahul's going to take us through it.
All right, thank you, Ken. Good evening. I'm Rahul from Dewberry, and I'm going to walk through the coastal storm surge results and the stormwater modeling results. I also want to remind everyone, like 2 weeks back, we had a big workshop or a big CAG meeting or a big public meeting where we discussed in detail all the coastal model results. All the results are on NJDEP's website. But today I'm just going to quickly walk through coastal storm surge results for a 100-year coastal storm surge event. And I'm going to talk about how each alternative fares when you look at the 100-year coastal storm surge that can hit the study area. So let's talk about the 100-year coastal storm surge for the baseline conditions and alternative one. So the baseline condition graphic is right here. We also call the baseline as the no action alternative. So it's an EIS term that is used. In no action alternative or the baseline conditions, the storm surge can come in from Weehawken Cove, and it can come in from the NJ Transit area through this area, and it can essentially flood the whole, like almost, I don't know, 90% or 85% of the study area. Portions like the Housing Authority, North Hudson Sewerage Plant can get about 6 to 9 feet of water without any resist alternative. So alternative one is our most protective alternative. It follows the waterfront alignment. You can see it starts from close to where the Lincoln Tunnel is. It follows the whole waterfront, comes all the way to the Maxwell Place. And on the south side, you have, on the south waterfront, you have a portion of the waterfront as a resist feature, and then you have on the NJ Transit side and then the Jersey City side, you have resist features as well. The red lines are the resist alignments for alternative one. So in this particular alternative, which is the most protective alternative, 98% of the current population living in the 100-year floodplain is going to receive flood risk reduction benefits. It's the most protective alternative among all the three alternatives. So let's move on to alternative two. Alternative two, again, on the left side, you see the no action alternative or the baseline conditions. This is without any resist feature. On the right side, you have alternative two. The red line is the alternative alignment. In this particular alignment, this alignment extends into portions of Weehawken in this area, follows the Weehawken Cove, comes along 15th Street, right in front of the Tea House building, and then comes along portion of the Washington Street. On the south side, there's nothing on the waterfront in this alternative, and this portion is very similar to what you saw in alternative one. This alternative gives flood risk reduction benefits for 86% of the population living in the current 100-year floodplain. Now let's talk about alternative three. Again, on the left side, we have the baseline conditions or the no action alternative, which shows what can happen without any resist feature. On the right side, you have alternative three, which essentially follows through Weehawken, comes along Weehawken Cove, follows Garden Street over here, and then goes through the alleyway, and then comes along Washington Street. On the south side, it's almost similar to alternative one as well. Oh, sorry, alternative two. There is nothing on the waterfront in this particular alternative. So in this particular alternative, about 85% of the population currently in the 100-year floodplain is going to receive flood risk reduction benefits. You can see the water depths in these different colors, and that's why we turned off the lights, so hopefully everyone can see the water depths and see the magnitude of differences that you can see each alternative is going to give when compared with the baseline conditions. So this is, again, a snapshot of what we discussed in the July 12th workshop CAG meeting or public meeting. All the materials are on NJDEP's website, so please feel free to visit the website. Now let's talk about stormwater modeling. We haven't talked about the stormwater modeling in the July 12th meeting, so I'm going to touch base on what we saw from the stormwater modeling results. So before I get into the results part, I want to just describe how did we create a stormwater model. We used Danish Hydraulic Institute's Mike Urban model. It's a FEMA-approved model to create the stormwater model. And the stormwater model basically requires all these inputs. The first input, which is the most critical input, is the pipe, manholes, and the pumps. North Hudson Sewerage Authority gave us the best available data. We used that data to build the model. Also, it's very important to note this storm sewer system in in Hoboken and portions of Weehawken and Jersey City are almost like a century-year-old or almost like 100 years old system. And I believe North Hudson is doing a great job at maintaining and operating that system. And we have used the best available data that they had collected so far to put in the model. The second element that goes into the model is the topography. Topography is important because when the system is surcharged, the water comes out on the road and it starts flowing over. So the topography captures which areas are going to get flooded during a heavy rainfall event. The third one is the rainfall. We included 24-hour rainfall for 5-year, 10-year, 50-year, 100-year rainfall, and that tells us how much areas are going to get flooded in a 5-year event, 10-year event, and so forth. And the last one, and not the least, is all the DSD alternatives, the delay stored discharge alternatives, along with the baseline conditions that I'll talk in a minute. All these things go into the model. The model uses a simulation engine. It runs through the hydraulics calculation, and it gives out results in the form of which areas are flooded, how much is the flow volume, and it gives you animations and so forth. So all these things are put in the model, and we use this model to show you, we are going to show you the results from this model for two types of conditions. The first condition is the baseline conditions. So what is baseline conditions? It's again the no action alternative. So for stormwater modeling, the baseline conditions includes projects that have been completed so far or are in the process of being constructed or completed. So what are those projects? H1 pump station is one of the projects. H5 pump station, the proposed Washington Street Rain Gardens, City Hall Green Infrastructure Project, and the ongoing construction at the Southwest Park. So all these projects are part of our baseline conditions or the no action alternative conditions. We also know that recently Pino site was approved. That is also going to provide flood risk reduction benefits from rainfall flood events. That can be included in the next phase of this project in the design phase. But we just wanted to acknowledge that we are aware of the Pino site. So once you have the baseline conditions, you have to create the delay stored discharge alternative condition or conditions model. So what does the DSD alternative include? It includes 4 major sites. The first one is the BSF site. So the BSF site is located right here, and it has a potential to collect about 55 acres of rainfall runoff flowing into the BSF site. The second one is the NJ Transit site. The NJ Transit site has a potential to collect about 15 acres from this drainage area into this area, which is the NJ Transit site, and it can transport the rainfall runoff all the way back using this pump station into the Hudson River. The third one is the Block 10 site that is just west of the Southwest Park, and it has a potential to capture about 8 acres of rainfall runoff volume. And the fourth one, which you see, are the crosshairs all along the west side of Hoboken. These are the potential right-of-way green and gray infrastructure sites. And there are about 61 sites that have a potential to capture 13 acres of drainage area. So we set up the model to simulate these two conditions. And once we set up the model, we get the results, and we evaluate the effectiveness of the DSD components over the baseline conditions. So, it's acres, like this drainage area is the acres. No, it's the area that flows into the BSF site. Okay, so before we get into the storm conditions, we wanted to make sure that the model is simulating a real storm condition. So we use Hurricane IRENE as our calibration validation storm event. The image that you see on the left over here shows the flooding extent in blue color that was seen during Hurricane IRENE. So the model was able to correctly simulate what happened during Hurricane Irene. These dots that you see on the screen are the dots collected from EMNET. EMNET is a company that was monitoring data during Hurricane Irene, and they said at these dots they had observed flooding. We also talked with North Hudson to ensure that the flood extents look reasonable, and we all agree that the flooding extent was similar to what was observed during Hurricane Irene. Again, Irene happened in 2011. At that time, we didn't have H1 pump station, H5 pump station, none of the baseline conditions. So we said, okay, let's rerun Irene as if it's going to happen today or maybe next year with the baseline conditions. Let's see what happens with that particular condition. So we reran Hurricane Irene we reran the Irene with the baseline conditions over here. This is Hurricane Irene. This is not the right title here. This is Hurricane Irene as if in 2011, and this is with the baseline conditions. In this conditions with the H1 pump station and all the other ongoing projects, you can see there is significant reduction in flooding, especially if you look at this area and over this area. And then over here, you can see there is significant flood risk reduction benefits if Irene happened today with the proposed or with the current baseline conditions. So we then said, okay, let's rerun Hurricane Irene with the proposed DSD alternatives. So on the left side, you're going to see the baseline conditions, which is what can happen today, and on the right side, you can see with the proposed DSD alternatives. Those 4 sites, 1, 2, 3, and then all the right-of-way green infrastructure sites. So you can see there is significant reduction, especially in this area, from the proposed DSD alternatives, and also in this area over here. So I think there is about 59% reduction in the flooding areas with the proposed DSD alternatives as compared to the baseline conditions. If Hurricane Irene happened in the same way as we should, if it happened if Hurricane Irene happened today. So, now let's move on to Hurricane Irene was more like a 50-year storm event. So we wanted to see what happens during a lesser frequency storm event, so like a 5-year rainfall event. It's also important to note that the whole storm source system is dependent on the tidal conditions in Hudson River. So you have to simulate the stormwater model with a low tide and with a high tide. So over here, you're going to see the conditions low tide. So what low tide does is during a storm event, all the outfalls are open, which means the water can flow, the stormwater runoff can flow into Hudson River. In the high tide conditions, the outfalls are closed, and only the pump stations are operating during high tide. So right now, you're seeing the results from a 5-year low tide event. And what you see in the 5-year low tide event is in the baseline conditions, you have some flooding in the south area and some flooding in the north area. And with the proposed DSD alternatives, you can see a significant reduction in the flooding areas. There's about 81% reduction in flooding areas with the proposed DSD alternative over the baseline conditions in a 5-year low tide event. Now let's move on to the 5-year high tide event. Again, in the high tide event, all the outfalls are closed and only the pump stations are operating. On the left side, you see the baseline conditions. You can see there's some flooding over here, and with the proposed DSD alternatives with all these 4 sites, you can see significant reduction in the flooding areas when compared with the baseline conditions. There's about 73% reduction in the flooding areas with the proposed DSD alternative in a 5-year event with the high tide condition. So this is what we did for the stormwater modeling. We also ran the model for 10-year event, 25-year event, 50-year event, and a 100-year event. All the results are going to be on the boards over here. So after the presentation, please come and see me if you have any questions, and we can go over the results. So now we want to just quickly walk you through. I'm just going to hold this for a second. I'm going to walk you through what our team member Scape did to just represent how a right-of-way green infrastructure can work. We are going to show you an animation of how the right-of-way green infrastructure can be constructed, and how it's going to work when you have rainfall falling on the streets and the sidewalk. So here's the animation. Here's your sidewalk. Your sidewalk will be dug and a tank will be put in. There will be an access manhole. A new catch basin is going to be here. There's going to be a backflow preventer, which is going to prevent the storm sewer from getting back into the tanks. There's going to be a thrash screen, so water, when it comes over here, the thrash will be collected. Now this is what happens during a rainfall event. All the water flows in along the curb line, flows in from the road. It gets into a catch basin and starts flowing into the tank. And in the tank, you have a small pipe and a weir wall. So what happens is the water slowly starts bleeding out of this pipe and starts flowing into the storm sewer system. And it slowly starts rising up as well. And then at one point, it's going to overtop and then flow over into the storm sewer system. There is a backflow preventer. So if the storm sewer system is surcharged, it's not going to allow the sewer to back into the tanks. And then as the rain passes away, you can see the water is going to slowly discharge back into the sewer system. And then on top of these things, you can have like green infrastructure on top of it. You can have plants and things like that. So this is how a subsurface tank is going to work in Hoboken. So with that, I'm going to give it back to Ken.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we're moving into the category of socioeconomics and built environment. If only someone had done that for me in class. It doesn't take much.
Okay, so socioeconomics and the built environment. Now, for this bucket, we call them buckets, remember? And it's the orange one. We considered how alternatives impact the physical environment. For this, we looked at criteria such as impacts to view corridors and access to the waterfront, impacts to connectivity, circulation, consider the number of gate crossings, because gate crossings can have an impact on circulation. We also consider potential benefits for people that live within the community. We recognize that the project provides for the opportunity to incorporate many new community amenities. For this, we considered the acreage of new or improved park space. We also, with major focus, this was a major focus of our urban design workshops over the last few months. We also considered benefits to public health, as well as benefits specifically to low-income and minority communities that result from reduction in persistent rainfall flooding. So I'm going to turn this over to Jen Baer, and she's going to talk about some of the socioeconomic impacts.
Thank you, Ken. I'm here to talk about the relationship between environmental justice, communities, and flood reduction. Now, as we can see, the environmental justice communities are generally areas where you find large communities of people of color, minorities, people who can classify them as Hispanic, or people who live below the poverty line. So, and what I also want to point out is that this data is based on 2010 census data, so it is 6 years old. It does not reflect the current level of development that we have seen in. So it does not reflect the amount of development that you've seen in the past 6 years. But based on the data that we do have available to us, we have environmental justice communities here. They're colored, the areas in the orange here and pink up here. I would expect that to change when the next census comes out, but this is the data that we have to work with. We do know that this environmental justice area here on the west side of the city does experience a lot of impacts from rainfall reduction, rainfall events, excuse me. And what we have found, based on the modeling that Rahul has done, that there are, if you follow the orange blobs here and here and here, there is a significant amount of flooding from rainfall events. Now, this model, of course, as Rahul said, was based on the 5-year storm event. So it also does not mean that the rest of the city does not receive benefits. As Rahul pointed out, there will be benefits from reduction of storm surge throughout the whole project area. That includes Weehawken, Hoboken and the portion of Jersey City. And then this is also a good point to know that 35 acres within the study area will no longer experience any flooding based on the modeling that we've done, and 48 acres during the 5-year event will also have a significant reduction in flooding. So especially for environmental justice communities here, along here within the study area, it is a very positive benefit, as it is a benefit for the remainder of the study area. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Alexis Landis from SKI.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to reiterate some of the points that Raul made earlier, but from an urban design and landscape architecture perspective. So the delay store discharge component, or the stormwater management portion of this project, consists of 3 large sites: the BASF site, the New Jersey Transit site, the Block 10 site, and 61 right-of-way sites located all on the western side of the city of Hoboken. In addition to managing flooding, these sites are opportunities for recreational amenities for the community. The project is adding approximately 15% of total area to the city of Hoboken for opportunities for recreation and other amenities. We've explored 3 different landscape options for the BASF site. These options are the destination, recreation, and eco. Each option provides amenities to the community, including playgrounds, gathering spaces, recreational amenities such as court sports and other things, educational opportunities, and these are all building off of feedback we've received from additional CAG meetings and the client group. Please come to our station after this presentation so we can walk you through specific details to each option. Oh, thanks. The New Jersey Transit site is located behind the Hoboken Housing Authority. We currently have 2 different design options for this site, one called active and one called passive. Both park options are proposed to be built on top of a 1.3 million gallons stormwater capacity storage tank. The active option is centered around a playground space and plaza. And the passive design option provides smaller gathering spaces for the residents with shaded planting areas around the perimeter. The Block 10 scenarios are designed to complement the upcoming Block 12 park site. We view Block 10 as an urban connector, linking the neighborhood with the PATH train, the light rail, and other urban fabric amenities currently today. We currently have 2 different design scenarios for Block 10, the passive and active options. Both have amenities such as court sports with basketball courts, gathering spaces, playgrounds, and also vegetated zones for shaded gathering areas. In addition to the destination sites, as Raul mentioned, we also have 61 right-of-way sites for subsurface tanks to be installed in the sidewalk and bump-out locations. Since the sidewalk must be removed to accommodate the tank installment, we have proposed a series of community amenities to be installed on the surface. Pictured here is one example of a rain garden-like gathering zone. So please come to our station afterwards and we can show you our matrix of options for the right-of-way locations. I'm very happy to introduce Laura, our design partner from OMA.
Thanks. Okay. So I'm going to go super fast, what has now been called Laura speed. So we'll see how we go. As Alexis mentioned, we'll be here after the meeting. So please, for the sake of time, I'm just going to kind of speed through. For those of you that have been at meetings before, We've talked you through some of the urban design ideas that we have at this stage, as the mayor presented at the beginning. This is really very preliminary. The design will go on for a lot longer, but we wanted to kind of share some ideas and some preliminary thoughts we had, which led to the ability to go through the screening criteria. So I'm going to make similar presentations that I've made before. We've developed them to an extent on the basis of your feedback, but under the light of the kind of screening criteria and how what those impacts are of these kind of design directions. So related to urban design, there are 4 essential screening criteria: view corridors, waterfront access, park space and the addition of new park space, and connectivity and circulation. So essentially what these mean related to view corridors, that means locations where existing view corridors are impacted. This can be residential, this can be retail. I'll talk through a couple of places where this happens. Related to waterfront access, it's the length in feet of waterfront access that's actually impacted by any urban design intervention. Related to the park space, it's simply new or improved park space that we're able to add in the context of this exercise. And finally, connectivity and circulation relates mostly to the number of existing parking spaces impacted or gate closures, as some of these operable gates are required to create a consistent resist barrier during a storm event. Just as a refresher, on the urban design front, we basically have a performative barrier which has multiple things that go into determining the look, feel, aesthetic, and performance of it. There's the technical performance and there's the urban performance. So how high is it? How does it actually behave in the case of a gate? What does it look like? That's all technical performance considerations. Urban performance is what amenities does it provide? Is there a way that it particularly integrates into the context? What is its functionality? And most obviously, how does it look? Just another quick reminder, we have 2 types of sites along the resist alignment that we're working with: services and placemaking. Services is typically narrow sites where there's a lot less that we have to do with it, and then placemaking is larger sites where we're actually making a larger impact on the community. Of the locations along the resist alignments within the 3 of the alternatives, we have a couple of major placemaking sites, and the rest are services. So I'm going to talk through one at a time, again, probably at a very quick speed, but we can go into more detail afterwards if you'd like. So each of the 3 alternatives share one site to the north of Hoboken, which is the Weehawken Cove Park. We presented some preliminary directions and have arrived at a design direction that's a kind of hybrid of several things that we presented before. Looking through this in the lens of the screening criteria, the greatest part about it is it does offer an amazing amenity for the community and the city in terms of a new park, which has a lot of different things integrated into it. Connects well to the boathouse. There's a very prominent view deck, even a kind of potentially urban beach condition. Some more intimate playground and lawn, and going through the entire site is a kind of a clear path. There's some recreation opportunities, so we're really, really excited about what this space can become. I think it's going to be quite amazing, and again, it's consistent through each of the 3 alternatives, integrated in each of the 3 alternatives. Just to the south in Zone 3, each of the 3 alternatives kind of split and are very different. Alternative 1 is along Weehawken Cove, so this is the waterfront alignment. The proposal that we have for this is a kind of series of viewing platforms along the waterfront. The obvious kind of benefit of this is that it does improve maybe the park and recreation space and gives a kind of access point along the water. There are a lot of impacts to the residential view corridors, which is, of course, the real problem with this. Waterfront access is also, of course, heavily impacted. Alternative 2 goes along 15th Street and Washington Street, and here we have a really, really nice landscape proposed along 15th Street, which we think will integrate into the community and what's happening there very well. Along Washington Street, we're trying to work with the right-of-way and the road configuration to create as little impact as possible on things like parking spaces. What's really nice is that the space provides a new kind of thoroughfare for pedestrians and potentially even additional recreation spots. So again, alternative two does have some impact on the view corridors and waterfront access, but has also, again, a really nice improved park and recreation scape. And the last alternative, alternative 3, along Garden Street and the alleyway, there's a couple of different components to this. Along Garden Street, the resist barrier is in the form of a kind of sloped planter, and at the southern side, some inset seating. So you see a condition like this when you're walking down the street. And then moving into the alleyway, you also have some planters and some integrated sites for seating or things that could be located here related to the market that's already there. There are a couple of sliding gate locations within this alignment, and the very east of the alleyway, we have two options for this. Parking is somewhat impacted, but in a very limited way. So alternative 3 has the really nice benefits, again, of some new park space and recreation space. There's very little impact in terms of, for example, no waterfront access is impacted. The residential view corridor impacts are more limited as well. Zone 4, which is again only applicable to alternative 1, which is along the waterfront. Here we have a kind of new park space proposed along the Independence Court, Maxwell Place Park, which will, although waterfront access is somewhat impacted, would also in theory provide some really great park space along the waterfront. And similarly in the south along the waterfront, we have along the alignment some again, impacts in terms of there would need to be some built structures in between the existing city and the water. However, that would potentially provide new gathering spaces and recreation courts and other amenities for the community. Okay, when we get to the south, we're in the area which is more services rather than placemaking. So we've developed a very extensive toolkit for the services sites, which we can again talk you through in more detail. But basically what services mean is that you have, in a way, a very simple performative barrier that can have kind of, for lack of a better term, maybe bells and whistles. It either becomes furniture, or you have lighting integrated, or you're able to integrate a mural or some other type of aesthetic treatment that makes it perhaps a little bit more of an amenity for the community, or something that actually offers something in addition to the protection and the flood risk reduction benefits provided. So some of these aspects, wayfinding, seating, bike parking, mural, wall planting, shrub planter, you'll see this as you move through in our proposals for some of these narrower sites where we can do less in terms of the actual placemaking. So in alternative 1 here in zone 6, we're essentially proposing several of these different services get implemented within the kind of barrier, and then alternative 3, 2, and 3 similarly. So along Observer Highway, you do have some impacts to both residential and retail view corridors, and it's not really a place where we have enough room or enough of a dimension to introduce new park or other recreational space. However, there's not really a high impact either to connectivity and circulation. There are a few gates that will need to go in place, but related to parking, there's not a heavy impact there. And then the southernmost zone, zone 7, is again a services site. So we have some ideas about how the different aspects of the toolkit could be applied along this alignment. This is a really kind of easy one when it comes to the screening criteria. There are a few impacts to the view corridors from on the residential front, but no impact to waterfront access, not a lot of room to do anything either in terms of adding kind of park space amenities. Circling back up to the north and looking at the Weehawken tie-in and generally zone 1 up here in the north, this is another space where alternative 1, 2, and 3 are very different. So I'll go through them one at a time. For alternative 3, which is the most inland, there is little impacts in terms of the access to the waterfront. There are some impacts to the view corridors, but again, this is a services site. We'll apply the toolkit and try and provide the amenities that we can within this narrow space, but not a lot of added space in this zone. Similarly, alternative 2 is again the application of the toolkit, a kind of services site. Alternative 1, which again is the waterfront alternative, has a few sites where you can maybe do a bit more. One is that the Lincoln Harbor Ferry stop, which we imagine can really provide access to the water and create a kind of amenity in the form of a kiosk or a resting place or a viewing deck for the community. And then along the northern part of Weehawken Cove, the park space, which we have a kind of hybrid option, sloped and sheltered, that could provide some amenities there as well. So this has high impact in terms of the waterfront access and the view corridor impacts, but also does offer some new amenities in the form of new and improved space for the community. So just to kind of end this section, we have been working with the design team to put together a couple of panoramas to show you our ideas around some of these spaces. So as has been presented, does not represent a final design, but we did want to try and take the design off the paper, out of the kind of two-dimensional world into the three-dimensional world, to give you a better idea of the directions that we're thinking for some of these things. We've chosen 3 sites that we've built a 3D model, and basically we'll go through them one at a time to explain to you how the sites could eventually look. The first is actually the site that's shared by each of the 3. You can maybe start with the Harborside Park. All 3. So the first is the Harborside Park to the north, which is the park that's shared by each of the 3 alternatives. So this, the design for this park could go forward in any case. This is Maxwell Place. So here you're standing just next to, essentially almost just next to the boathouse. And on either side, you have the high point, so the resist alignment that runs diagonally through the center of this park. And there's a high point where there's a kind of meandering path that you can walk along, and on either side of you are sites for recreation. So near the water, there could be a kind of urban beach. Further inland, there could be recreation in the form of basketball courts and other types of kind of sporting courts that the community could use at their leisure. We also imagine a kind of lawn space and a dog run, some things that could really be integrated into this really new, amazing amenity for the city and the community. We'll run these, we'll keep these running after the meeting, so you can spend some time checking it out. It's really fun to see. The next one, maybe do 1. The next one is further south along the waterfront, so this is only applicable to alternative 1. And this is the park where, again, you can see along the waterfront and along the piers. And this is the one that I was explaining related to the screening criteria, where although the view corridor and waterfront access is impacted, again, this is an opportunity to create new park space for the city and to provide some really amazing and exciting park space along the water. So trying to do both in this instance if alternative 1 were to be selected. And then lastly here at the south, so this is specifically related to alternative 2, and this is one of the services sites. So this isn't necessarily something we think about related to placemaking, but you can see on the, Ken's gonna scroll back to the, now in the center of the screen, this is one of an example of our application of the toolkit onto this resist alignment in the form of the wayfinding, the integration of the green, so it could make a green wall, the integration of the furniture. There's a lot of different ideas and directions and ways that we can make these really amazing amenities for the city. So this is then on the southern side. So I'm gonna leave it at that for now, and please do come see us if you have further questions.
Thank you, Laura.
So Laura and Alexis will be in the back of the room, as well as other folks related to the socioeconomic and urban design features.
Putting these benefit costs down.
Yes, I know.
Oh,
You can't catch me. We're moving into the benefit costs category.
Okay, benefit cost. Quite simply, it's looking at what does the project cost and what are the benefits? What are the damages and the costs you're avoiding by implementing these resist features or delay, store, discharge? And so we have John Scorsati here who's going to go through it in great detail, but first I'm going to talk a little bit about the costs. So first looking at alternative one, which is, we've mentioned it's the waterfront option, where you basically have and we're talking resist now, okay, alternative one, where it's along the waterfront, where these structures have to be fairly high because it's right at the water's edge. We have a range of construction costs. There's two different options also for each one of these alternatives. Down at the south end, there's an option that goes through the transit yard, and then there's another option that's option one, and option two goes along Observer Highway. So you'll see option one and option two. We are in feasibility stage. I mean, we're completing a feasibility study, so we determined that a range of costs is the best approach at this point. So basically, for our construction costs for alternative one, we're between $345 million and $395 million. Our design costs, engineering project management, we base that off the high end for each option because there's a lot of design work to do and a lot of details yet to get worked out. And so at feasibility, we wanted to be conservative. And then also, that gives us an estimated project cost of between $440 and $492 million. We've also added project contingency into this, just because there are unknowns at this stage. That's roughly around 22% of the total project costs. So it brings the total project cost for alternative one somewhere in the range of between 537 and 602. For alternative two, just a refresher, alternative two is an inland alignment. It also, we call it the 15th Street alignment two. It goes down 15th Street to Washington Street. There's a similar alignment in the south end. So we have a range of construction costs between option one and option two of $145 million to $174. Our design engineering project management in the $56 million area. And then estimated project costs between $201 and $232 million for alternative two, with project contingencies also at about 22%. We're looking at a project cost of $243 to $282 for alternative two. And then alternative three, which we call the alleyway. It's also an inland alignment, and it goes through the alleyway, across Bloomfield to Washington and down Washington. Construction costs of $136 to $163 million. Design engineering project management around 54 to 56, with an estimated total project cost of $189 to $225. And then when we throw in our project contingency at this point, it brings the total project cost from somewhere from $230 million to $274. Again, these are fairly conservative, but that's what we want to be at this point in feasibility. As we get further into design, the contingencies get reduced and so forth, and there's less unknowns. Delay, store, discharge, we've also estimated. We have a range of costs between $85 and $100 million for delay, store, discharge. Design costs in the same neighborhood as a percentage, 17 to 21 million. So the total project cost is somewhere between 100 and 121 million. With a contingency, we're looking at 126 to 148 million for the delay, store, discharge. So just wanted to set the table with those numbers, and then John Scorsati from our Fairfax office is going to bring us through benefit cost.
This is done. Back to you. Okay. All right, good evening, everybody. I'm going to talk briefly, mercifully briefly, about benefit cost analysis. The purpose of benefit cost analysis, it's not about determining necessarily what's the cheapest project. It's about focusing on the benefits of a project outweighing its costs or having a benefit cost ratio greater than 1.0. For all federally funded projects, whether it's HUD, whether it's FEMA, they want to see cost-effective projects. They want to see a BCR of 1.0 or greater to know that they're investing in a cost-effective project. Benefits are typically determined over a period of time. Costs are typically upfront costs. Benefits are usually the harder part to determine. The next slide will kind of focus on that in a second. Benefit cost analysis also gives us a convenient way to compare our projects. So let's just go to the next slide real quick. One of my arrows got flipped. But as you can see, Rahul talked a lot about all the different flood hazard analyses that were done. We also incorporated a lot of information on all the structures in the project area. Those two combined gave us a way to estimate damages in different scenarios, from the 10-year to a 50-year to a 100-year flood, for the no-action alternative as well as for the different alternatives, to say, what's the physical damages we're seeing, what are the service losses we're seeing in these different scenarios versus the no action. When we look at that, that's how we get our avoided damages from the different scenarios. That's how we get our benefit, okay? We weigh that benefit against the total cost of the project. In our case, Ken just kind of set the table with the project cost. He gave you a range of the different alternatives. What we did in the numbers that are on here, we took the middle of those ranges for each alternative, and we added an additional cost. We added an operation and maintenance cost. That's not a cost that's going to be covered by a federal grant, but it is necessary to maintain the project's effectiveness. Typically, it's an annualized cost, usually about 1% of the project cost. You annualize that over time, it ends up being about 15% of the total cost. If you want to know all the excruciating details, I can provide them over there later. I'll be in the hall out there, so please bring this. It'll be a convenient fan for you as well. All right? So we take those benefits and those costs, we create our benefit cost ratio for each of the project scenarios. So you can see on your sheet here, we've got benefit cost ratios. We've got the total benefits for the projects. We've got those also versus the total cost for the resist to give our benefit cost ratio there. We also have that for the delay, store, discharge options. So you can see all of the BCRs are over 1.0. We like to see that, and some are a little higher than others. That's good as well. But we can get into other details. I also have Daniel Miles with me from eConsult. I don't know if Dan, are you here? You can raise your hand. Dan will be with me as well. He actually helped develop a lot of the economic analysis that we were looking at. And so I'll be able to answer any other detailed questions on that later. I think I'm going to turn it back over to you, Ken, right now. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Okay, so we're moving now into category of maintenance, operation, and construction.
Thank you, Commissioner. Everybody paying attention still? We're getting there.
You're with us. You're with us.
Okay, good. So constructability is one of the things that we're looking at here. What are the construction challenges? What are temporary construction impacts on things like traffic, train activities, people, property, utilities? Where all these concerns have implication on the overall construction complexity, and they impact cost, they impact duration of the construction. And we're also looking at ongoing operational and maintenance costs. And those costs also factored into the BCA. So just talking a minute about the maintenance costs. Maintenance costs are really a function of what are you maintaining? Gates. The number of gates is a huge issue when it comes to maintenance of resist structures. And so if you look at the maintenance costs here for option 1, we're somewhere between 3.5, and again, as John said, we're using a factor of 1% at this feasibility stage, 1% of the project costs for maintenance, thereabouts, a little more or less, depending on whether it's delay, store, discharge, or resist. You get more granular about those maintenance costs as the design moves on. You've got alternative 1 is about, I think it's about 15,000 linear feet also. So you've got a longer structure, you've got more gates, that means more maintenance costs. Alternative 2, you see it's $1.5 million to $2.6 million. Again, that's about 8,000 linear feet of structure. there's about 21 gates, where you're looking at 29 gates for alternative 1. And then for option 3, we're between 1.4 million and 2.4 million. At this point, there's 19 gates for option 3 and 7,700 linear feet of resist for option 3 too. So it's really a function of length, number of gates here. Delay, store, discharge, it's a little bit over 1%. There's a little more maintenance activity associated with that type of infrastructure. So we're holding at this point 1.5 to 2.4 million. This mapping shows the number of parcels in green that are privately owned. And so another constructability issue is, do you need easements? Do you need temporary easements? Do you need permanent easements to build these structures? There's quite a few of them along the waterfront. There's a handful in some of the inland locations. And so these are a function on your impact to your ability to construct, and also could impact cost. Alternative 1 has the highest amount of potential, also utility crossings. Alternative 1 has about 87 or 86, depending on the option, of utility crossings. And then between 4,600 to 4,800 feet of utilities being impacted because it's the longest structure. Alternative 3 has the least amount of utility crossings, about 64, and only 1,000 to 1,200 linear feet of utility impacts. And that's the alternative that goes through the alleyway. Alternative 2 kind of falls in the middle. So, the takeaway here is just there's a lot of property impacts with alternative 1. Alternative 2 and 3 are about the same. It's about 5 impacts there. And also you get a much reduced impacts in terms of utilities with alternatives 2 and 3.
The final category, environmental impacts.
Okay. So this bucket considers the impact of the build alternatives on the built and natural environment. We consider project impacts to various environmental regulations, both on state and federal level. For this, we took into consideration criteria including impacts, areas of recognized environmental conditions, the estimated amount of fill that potentially would have to be removed from the site as a result of a certain construction alternative or alignment. Necessary state and federal permitting. Permits could impact your ability to complete the project by 2022, because that is the goal. These funds are only available if this project gets completed by September 2022. The natural ecosystems, including impacts to threatened and endangered species and habitat, and also fish habitat. Cultural resources, historical and architectural. And then noise receptors too. The project involves construction in a densely urban and built-in urban environment, and so there are noise receptors also, so we're looking at that. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Zach Davis from Dewberry to go through this for us. Zach?
Good evening. Everyone still with us? Great, we're almost there. Environmental considerations were taken into account to look at the effect of the proposed project as it would affect several categories, as Ken went over. This is all part of the environmental impact statement that's required under NEPA, as you've heard before. We have with us tonight our experts in these subject matters who are available for addressing any questions you may have afterwards as we go through this presentation. And I will point them out, or maybe they'll raise their hand, or you'll find them later if you have specific questions. The first category that we'll discuss here are recognized environmental conditions. And you can see there's quite a bit on this slide here showing essentially locations of potentially contaminated areas that have potential contaminated soil or water conditions, and these soils would have to be taken away, from the site during construction. If you look down here, if you look down here on the bottom, you can see the number of recognized environmental conditions for alternative 1, 2, and 3. They're all pretty much about the same by each for each alternative. And you can see where those environmental conditions are located throughout the study area here. The subject matter expert for this is Charles Stebbins, who's located here in the building with us too. Moving on to environmental permitting, this concerns the types of federal or state permits that would be required to be issued for this project as we move through the construction, or to get construction allowed for this project. And you can see that there are the different types of permits that would be required. Alternative 1 would require more federal involvement on the Army Corps. That would require a nationwide permit, whereas the alternatives 2 and 3 would require more on the statewide. The alternative 1 would still require statewide, but a little bit more permitting required for alternative 1 compared to 2 and 3. And there's also noted that there's a very small wetland impact down here in the southwest corner of the project. That's consistent for all 3 of the alternatives. Another area that we looked at for permitting requires the change in the reduction in the flooding for the New Jersey DEP, flood hazard water permit that would have to be issued. What this slide shows is a little bit confusing at first, but if you look at it, the green essentially is what we want to see. It's the areas that have reduced flooding that would have been present without this project. With this project being put in place, every area that you see as green is having reduced flooding, and so this is for alternatives 1, 2, and 3, moving from left to right. You can see that alternative 1 has significant flood reduction, but there is also some slight increase in flooding based upon alternatives 2 and 3, and those areas we would have to be looking at, those parcels we'd have to be looking at as to how we address that increased flooding as part of the permitting for this project. This shows the northern part of our project, and this shows the southern part of the project. Again, the same, the green being a very good thing to consider, whereas the pink is an area where we would be increasing flooding based upon this project. And then let's move on to the next. I'm sorry. Regarding permitting for wetlands and that, the subject matter expert here is Brian Sayre, and he is here in the building. So now we move on to archaeology, and we did an analysis of areas of where we think there would be archaeological potential that could be impacted by this project. This is part of the Section 106 compliance of the National Historic Preservation Act. And you can see the areas in orange are highlighting areas where we believe there's archaeological potential. And this is a combination of all 3 alternatives put together. So the implementation of one alternative would not have all these effects. But you can see the total acreage that is anticipated to have areas of impacted by archaeology from alternatives 1, 2, and 3. Hoboken has a lot of history. It's very hard to not affect archaeology in this town. The subject matter expert for this area is myself, so if you have questions on this, you can come ask me what were we doing here. Similarly, we have looked at the historic architecture impacts of this project. Again, Hoboken has history everywhere. I mean, you may as well landmark the entire city because it's all history here. And that's kind of what this map is showing, that there's a tremendous number of historic districts in the town, and that any of these alternatives are going to impact historic architectural resources. You can see that alternative 1 actually has the fewest number of impacts to historic properties. Again, if you have questions on this, you can talk to me after the presentation. And the last area that we looked at are noise receptors. And this is areas of in the town, in the city, that would be impacted by noise, but during construction. This is not obviously during the use of the project, but the construction of the project. And so where would areas of, say, parks or schools or places of worship, where would those areas be impacted by the alternatives? And you can see the summary of the numbers here in terms of number of places that would be impacted. So those are the variables that we went through in identifying, doing this alternatives analysis to help us eventually come to the preferred alternative. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Arnie, to the commissioner. There we go. All right.
Who turned the lights off? There we go. They wouldn't let me do that. So 2 weeks ago, we had the meeting that showed the modeling results for the three alternatives. In the past 2 weeks, the amount of work that was done by Dewberry, by OMA, by SCAPE, by the DEP team, I think is incredible. I think we showed you the information exactly the way we wanted, in the quantity that we wanted. And now what we're asking from you, is your comments regarding what you've seen tonight. It's complicated, it's detailed. Question you ask yourself is, did these guys leave anything out? Did we, over the past year, forget something that was not discussed tonight? You'll have to look at the matrix in detail. I know they ran through this very quickly. But think, you don't have to give your comments necessarily tonight. You have a couple of weeks or several weeks to get your comments in. But that's what we've asked of you tonight. Now, the Dewberry team led by Ken Spahn has been introduced, and I'm going to take a second to introduce the DEP team that worked so hard along with Dewberry. I'll start with Dennis Reinecht, the guy back there in the good suit. Alexis Taylor. Clay Sutton next to her. And Frank Schwartz, the project manager. Frank? Oh, okay. So anyway, I just want you to know the effort that went into getting this ready for tonight. I think it was quite impressive in the past 2 weeks. Thank you. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Block. Oh, Ken's?
We want to go through the takeaways, right?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So, Commissioner hit on a lot of things, but just make sure. Okay. You can't hear me when I speak? No? Okay, sorry. Well, it doesn't come up high enough either, but. And I never could fit in those seats in college. I just want you to know this. Besides getting vertigo coming into the room.
Well, then you didn't have to go to class.
Yeah. So, just we want to plant these thoughts. You know, all three build alternatives provide substantial level of flood risk reduction. And Rahul didn't point it out necessarily, but even in areas like in Jersey City that are sort of still in the 100-year storm that still get flooded, they're getting flooded at a lower level than they would without the resist portions being in place. So, and there's benefits for the city and the region to just be open and not closed because of flooding. So even if you're in an area that doesn't flood and you're within the project area, if the rest of your city's not flooded. So, you know, some of the figures talk about the area that receives flood risk reduction benefit, but the whole area does receive it. All three build alternatives for the risk screen with benefits and impacts, and it'll continue to be assessed. I mean, none of them are perfect, right? And we are going to get to a preferred alternative, and there's pluses and minuses, but some have fewer minuses than others. Some are executable, some are not. Community input has and will continue to help shape the project. As the Commissioner said, we're looking for that tonight, and over the next couple of weeks, we'll be taking comments on this information. The design process continues, as the Mayor pointed out earlier, and then also the screening criteria results show that we have viable alternatives for advancement. So, you know, we have a project here, which is really good news. So next, I think we're going to...
Let me just interject one more thing. Clay? Did I say Clay Sutton? Clay Sherman. Clay Sherman. All right. And Kim McAvoy here, recently joined our team. So thank you.
Got to set it straight. Thank you. So we're going to move into Q&A in a second. Just want to remind you, we'll have comments open through the next 3 weeks for what we showed tonight. The recommended preferred alternative meeting will be September 8th. Right now is the date for it. And then the draft environmental impact statement, you can continue to make comments all the way up through draft environmental impact. is in late November, and then, as we pointed out before, the public hearing for the draft environmental impact is December. The website where you'll see this presentation, it's video tonight, so all of it will be on the website. There's also a lot more information of other model runs that Rahul has done for both the rainfall modeling and the coastal modeling. All this information is on the website. So I'll turn it over to Arnie now to take us to the next phase.
Thank you. So two things before we do question and answer. Actually, I'm going to ask many of the speakers who's presented if they'd like to come and sit at the panel here, and we're going to ask that some of your questions be directed to them. Oh, okay. The other thing I wanted to let you know is where you can get a lot more detailed information tonight about these various topics and criteria that you heard about. So I'll repeat it again after we do Q&A for a little bit, but I wanted to let you know now. Up front here, after we finish here, we're going to have 3 sets of groups talking to you. One will be about, if you want to just talk more about the alternatives, understand what's in them, want to leave some comments with us about them. And if you're very new to the project, I know there were about a half a dozen people or so who said they've never come before, it's maybe the first time they're hearing this, this might be the best place for you to be, right up front here. But we're also going to have up front here people to talk to you about the environmental impact statement process and the alternatives analysis process, just from a process point of view, what does it entail, and things like that. And then finally, a very interesting area, the flood risk reduction, and Rahul will be here to talk to you about some of that and show you some boards and things. In the back, where you see all the boards up there right now, is discussion. We'll have people back there, and you can come talk to them about socioeconomic impacts and the built environment. Some of the wonderful pictures you saw will be discussed back there. Also in the back, on my right, all the way in the back, we have some guests here tonight from the North Hudson Sewerage Authority, and they're going to talk to you about some of the work they're doing, particularly in terms of their long-term control plan. Outside, where unfortunately it's a little warmer, but after this chill right now, it might be good to go out there for a little bit at least, you'll find people with boards talking about construction, maintenance, and operations, the benefit cost analysis that you heard a little bit about before, just before, and some more detail about environmental impacts that we just heard about. So what I'm going to ask is if you would mind, we have 2 mics here that we're going to ask people to come down, and what we'd really love to hear, and I'll go back and forth if some are on the left or the right, I'll go back and forth. We'd really like to hear your comments directed about the matrix, because we'll learn a lot about it. I think you'll learn a lot about it. And so I'm going to ask if you would mind coming to the microphone. Would that be okay? And you can go right now. We have this first person here. If anybody wants to come down to the other mic, I'll do it one at a time. And go ahead. And if you would like to...
well, I'd just like to thank everyone for this tremendous effort. One of the questions I have is, you have very exact numbers about the cost and the ratio, but aren't we working with a moving target? What if it turns out that there's no climate change, or maybe more likely that it's worse than you thought? So what provisions have you made, or how have you considered the fact that you're making a choice, 1, 2, or 3, and we don't know which, let's say we don't know which the best one is. Which alternative gives you the most leeway in case it was the wrong one or not the optimal one,
Okay.
to modify it?
Okay.
And has that been considered?
Okay, let me... Okay, I'm going to ask Ken to do that. Thank you.
That's a good question. Is this working? And what I can answer it one way, in that we considered, for all the alternatives, we considered the ability to construct them to a higher flood level. Right now, it's being designed for the 100-year storm. It does include also 2.34 feet for sea level rise, and then a foot of freeboard also above the 100-year flood level. If sea level rise is worse than what people are predicting, then all three alternatives have the ability to go higher. If it's not as bad as people are predicting, well, hopefully, Mayor of Hoboken and the citizens of Hoboken are getting a good amenity. I mean, if it's not as bad, I think that's kind of good news. But it's a good question. I don't know if anybody cares to add.
That's great.
Okay, we'll go on this side now. You're next.
All right, yeah, I just want to preface my
A little
question. Did you turn this on? Yeah, thanks. I want to preface my question by just saying I'm glad that climate change was mentioned, because sometimes when I read articles and hear people talk about this, it's a 100-year flood, it's this kind of flood, it's the old style of evaluating these things, and not the escalating dangers that we are facing. And because of that, although I'm a property owner and I live on Washington Street, I'm not concerned so much about my views. I'm concerned about the safety and preservation of the city.
Okay.
So my dumb question is, and pardon me if this has been asked before, I'm sure it has, in fact.
It's okay.
I have not seen one single floodgate in all these pictures from the street level or somewhere. All these aerial shots and drawings don't tell me anything about what this is going to look like. I want to see a picture of a floodgate, and I want to know if you're considering movable versus stationary floodgates. What is that all about? I've never heard anybody explain that, and so please do.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Who would like to take this? Okay.
That's a good comment. I mean, the floodgates in all the images you saw were sort of in the open position, so they weren't there. And so I think it's a good comment, and I think we need to add, what the floodgates actually look like. We have pictures. Do you want to talk a little bit about it?
The easiest answer is that's a good comment, and I think we will include that going forward for the floodgates. Again, our intention was to show in non-storm conditions how the system is going to look like. In the storm conditions, yes, obviously the floodgates are going to be closed. Most of the people will be evacuated, or will probably have to leave the city if it's a Category 5 storm. Obviously, if it's a lesser storm, we don't have to evacuate. There are a lot of factors involved in that. So, yes, we agree the floodgates are not shown, but it will be shown hopefully as we go forward into the project.
Well, where are they?
So if you visit our station once we're done with the Q&A, we will show you exactly where the floodgates are for each alternative.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so please come here.
I'll just jump in and say, so just so you understand, the concept is that the floodgates, so for example, one floodgate would be located, so there's the Weehawken Cove, the Hoboken Cove Park that we would design, and then the floodgate it's proposed to go diagonally across the 15th Street intersection and then connect in with along Garden Street. So the idea is to design it so that it can be almost come out of the park design and be deployed across. So the idea is that it would always be at the location. It would be designed in a way so it's not visible during our everyday lives, but then it could be pulled across and secured.
Is that true of all of the gates you're considering? That they are in effect movable, not infinitely movable, but on the location, retractable, so to speak?
Retractable, yes.
Most of them are, except for I think there are 2 locations where we have flood locks. So most of them are in place.
All right, thanks
Okay,
a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next question?
Hello. Just looking at the DSD components and the alternatives here, are those costs are not included with the resist costs, but was just wondering, is that slated to move forward no matter what, or it's talked about a little bit, but it's not that explicit on this here?
Okay, thank you.
So a lot of those projects are, so this design kind of built on a lot of the things that were already happening in the city. So for example, so just kind of walking you through the Southwest Park, that is actually right now under construction, and that will be built with a detention system. The 7th and Jackson Park, that's going to be built as a 2-acre park. We passed a redevelopment agreement, and that is what will fund that project, and it is proposed to take about 18 months. So once, actually next week's council meeting, once that happens, they're going to be starting construction as soon as they can, and they're projecting about 18 months out from that. The pump at 11th Street is under construction, and I thank again North Hudson Sewage Authority for their partnership. That is under construction and should be going online this fall. And so the BASF site, the city is under negotiations. We're looking to take a low-interest loan to fund that. So there's a lot of projects that the city is looking to, we're looking at various options to get those funded, and they're underway already.
And the 61 right away, are those part of this project, or is it different? Do we know yet?
Is this one, how's this turn on? Is it on? Hello, everyone. I'm Dennis Reinick. We have planned to do a pilot DSD as part of this project. We haven't selected with our partners and our stakeholders which ones we'll be able to evaluate and install, but we have recognized areas for, Raul, correct me if I'm wrong, areas where it's possible to install these DSD elements throughout the city.
Okay, thank you. Our next questioner over here on the left.
Yeah, I actually have 2 issues I'd like to raise. I went through your numbers on the cost of doing alternative 1, 2, and 3, and it seems clear that what initially seemed like a very generous grant, a $230 million grant, will be completely consumed by the cheapest alternative, if these numbers are accurate. So, and initially, when this project was proposed, it was supposed to be a comprehensive strategy for dealing with flood prevention. And I understand all the other things the city is doing, but I'm wondering if this is going to put an undue financial burden on the city to do all the rest in addition to the resist, and also it also raises the issue of maintenance, because that also seems like a very big nut to cover, and how is that going to be done?
Okay, thank you.
And I have just one other issue I'd like to raise, and that in going through this matrix, was consideration given for the probability of another surge, versus the more typical type of flooding that we have in Hoboken? Because when Dr. Blumberg made his presentation, he talked about it being a 260-year event. And I'm wondering if that is being factored in weighing, this whole program and the value of the resist part of it.
Okay, yeah. 2 different types of questions. Which one would the panel like to answer first?
Sure, I can take the first one. So, yeah, Ron, as you pointed out, I mean, I would agree that for me, when I was really strongly advocating for the funding for this grant, I envisioned that this would be a comprehensive plan, and that was the direction that we were going to go in. I think it's important for me as mayor, it's very important to hear residents' feedback, and I've had not only been a part of every single one of these community meetings, but I've also had with Caleb Stratton, who's the project manager for the city, working on the city side, we've had meetings, dozens of meetings throughout the city, and the strong feedback that we've heard from the community is that there's huge resistance to the waterfront alignment. That's just a reality that, I think needs to be strongly considered, and that's part of, that's what I've been hearing, and that's what would be, strongly considered. And so, I can let someone else speak to the numbers, but the numbers show for alternative 3 that it is feasible. It's built in, it's got 25% contingency, I think 3% a year for inflation. So the numbers are feasible, and as far as the maintenance costs, there's 3 communities that will benefit. There's other agencies that will benefit. It's going to need to be a partnership, and some ideas that are already under discussion is the idea of potentially partnering with North Hudson Sewage Authority. They already have, an existing institution that, and this is going to kind of cross over with, their work that they do. And so that's one idea, and that would be a huge cost savings to kind of work in partnership with them as part of the maintenance. So it is feasible. One of the options is definitely feasible, and based on community feedback. That's really, really important to me to hear that, and the community feedback that I've heard again and again is really concerned about the waterfront alignment and pursuing that. So,
Did you want to talk about surge?
Well, yeah. So Ron, on like your last question, we are using federal dollars. We're planning based on the FEMA 1% or 100-year storm. That's what we're planning for here. We've also added, in terms of the elevation of the features, for some sea level rise. And I think the benefit cost shows you that there's real value in planning for this and doing it, because you've got huge benefits from putting in this barrier in the event of a coastal event. And this benefit cost analysis factors in the probability of this happening. So you're still getting a huge benefit here with that 1% probability. So you can talk to John about it more later. He can fill you in on a lot of details. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And I don't want to speak on behalf of Dr. Bloomberg. I just know that the first time I met him, he said, a storm is coming. Another storm is coming. And it's all about risk and when it'll happen again.
Okay. On this side, who's our next questioner?
Hey, good evening. My name is Carter Kraft. I'm a co-chair of the Community Advisory Group, along with friend and neighbor, Ms. LaTrenda Ross.
Hi. Good evening.
You have to talk into the mic.
Good evening, everybody.
Okay.
I want to go back to, I support the project, but more importantly, I support the process. Because if you look back at the chronology of where we've been over the last year, we've been coming to meetings, we've been putting stuff on paper, and quite honestly, in a surprising number of cases, they've been listening. So I say that mildly as a cynic and a taxpayer in the year 2016. Watching what's going to happen with the election this fall, we're all kind of feeling the same kind of heartburn. But I do want to thank the team for stepping away from the initial instinct to say resist, 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 because what we're really seeing is a meaningful level of effort and thought and analysis and planning and design going into the delay store discharge to deal with what quite honestly is too routine of flooding, like we had on Monday, like we may be having right now, even though we're all safely inside here, and we know we will have again. But I do want to ask a few questions related to some previous comment which we submitted last October.
Do you mind if we do have a number of speakers? Do you
That's
mind if
okay.
you keep it maybe to one?
Number one is
chairman of the CHA.
protecting vulnerable people. We talk about using census data from the year 2010. By the time this thing is built, it's going to be 2022, maybe longer. It's going to be 15-year-old data. Is there a way to get a little more granular data from the Housing Authority, from the city's housing office, from the different planning, zoning, and city council actions that have been taken in the recent history to try to get a little more localized data on who those vulnerable people are and where they live? Because we're going to need that, to Ron's point, when we figure out where and how to allocate the money. And if we don't have the data by that time, we're not going to have the time then to go get it. The second question is, we talked about on screening criteria last fall, identifying near-term and scalable opportunities. So encourage that Dennis talks about in the big budget. There may be a meaningful delay store discharge project. But for the green infrastructure the city's doing now, can we collect data on that? Can we get more than anecdotal operating and maintenance experience and operating and maintenance costs so that we really get a better picture of what we're looking for? Or going to be responsible for. And then the last piece, and Ron mentioned it already, but it's worth mentioning again, it's not just the operating and maintenance cost, it's the mechanisms. What entity is that? Or what entities are those who are going to be taking care of all this infrastructure? Is it a public-private partnership? Is it a network of entities? 19 gates, is that one company? Is that 19 property owners?
Thank you.
So more thought on the mechanism.
Okay, we'd like to get to the answers.
Carter, that's excellent. Can I just take the last one on the O&M? We need to get to a preferred, but we are starting the planning stages of what an operation and maintenance plan is for this project and what it will be. It will take a long time to develop. But part of that, and I know Mayor Turner and Mayor Zimmer and Jersey City are all working together with primary stakeholders to start framing out how that could look. And Carter, I think that's an excellent question. I just think it's going to reveal itself over time with the agreements. I don't know if Mayor Zimmer, you'd like to add to that, but we're going to be meeting monthly with the primary stakeholders to start framing out that O&M plan, and it will become fuller and fuller and fuller until this system becomes operational, and it's required as part of the money.
Right, so just to add on to that, yeah, as far as the operations and maintenance, there's the maintenance piece of it, and as I mentioned, we're, one idea is, potentially a partnership with North Hudson Sewage Authority. As far as the operations, what happens during a major storm, obviously that's going to be a major part of the decision-making around this, and so there's going to be workshops on that, and there's going to, I'm talking to my chiefs, and there's going to be representatives from the police department and the fire department engaged in that process and giving their input as well. So from each community to really work on what's the best approach. So the focus, obviously, has been, for the last year, is getting us through this EIS process, design concepts so we can get to that preferred alternative. But, very much as we move forward with the preferred alternative, the focus will then be on, okay, how is this maintenance really, what are those true costs? How are we going to frame this out? And how is, what's the operation during a major storm? And to speak to your, your monitoring question, we have a partnership with Stevens. Again, I want to thank Stevens for hosting us tonight and for all that they do working with us on, the flooding issues. But we have a partnership with them, and we are, very focused on the fact that we need to do more monitoring, and we need to know what are the benefits that we're laying out, that we're going to see.
Okay.
So.
And I'd like to even point out, North Hudson is here tonight and has a table, and New Jersey Transit is here as well.
Okay, thank you.
If you'd like to talk to them, they're in the corner at the top.
And the other question, maybe we
the
could
data
get
on vulnerable populations. Anybody?
Oh, yes. I mean, that's something that the city could try to work on. I mean, we do know that this is definitely, we do know that the housing authority, which is going to remain here and is a great part of our community, they received about 6 to 9 feet of flooding. So those buildings are there and they're not moving, and so that is something that it's an important part of this project and protecting the housing authority. But we can work on getting additional data and work with the with the housing authority to get that data. But we do know that those buildings exist. They are they are staying, and we need to focus on. That's an important part of this, is for people to understand, and that has been, quite frankly, a challenging part of this process. Is that the people who are directly impacted are a lot of them live along the waterfront. They're saying, "Oh, I didn't flood." And not understanding that the western side of the city, so they're not as directly impacted because it's not right next to their house. A lot of these 3 alternative resist alignments, but the reality is all 3 of these options will protect areas like the housing authority and make sure that we don't have 6 to 9 feet of floodwaters back, when the next Sandy hits.
If I can just chime in.
We'll partner with North Hudson Sewage Authority.
I can just chime in about why we're using 2010 census data. We are required to analyze EJ communities, and there are parameters and there's guidelines that we need to follow. And so that's why we use the most reliable data is the 2010. There is the American Community Survey estimates, but they're based on the 2010 census data, and the difference really is negligible. So that's why we're using 2010. It's the best data that we have right now, and it fulfills the requirements that we are required to follow to perform the EJ analysis. We can use, we can get data from the housing authority, we can supplement it, and that could be part of the narrative. But in terms of analyzing what the EJ communities are and their size, there are parameters that we must follow. So, thank you. Sure.
I'm going to go to this side.
Yeah, my name is Richard Weinstein. I'm an attorney in Hoboken, and I actually spent 8.5 years at the Environmental Protection Agency in Region 2 in New York. And we worked on matters involving Superfund and RECRA, and although this is not the same type of a discipline or a project, there are similarities, and one of my concerns here is the methodology that you use to arrive at these decisions that the SME people have made to pick three alternatives and then eventually one alternative. Now, putting aside the NEPA process that's involved here, we look at the feasibility question. Now, in order for you to make a determination as to what your project is and whether it's feasible, you have to have a lot of data to make that determination, or you have to apply a model. Now, early on in this process, when I first got involved in it, in June of 2015.
Do you mind if I ask you if you could get to the question?
No, you had 40 minutes. I feel I can.
No, I would like you to get, I have eight people who want to ask questions.
You had 40 minutes to present your side, and I have a few introductory remarks. I'm going to get through them very quickly.
I would like you to do them quickly so we can get to the question, and others can, because we do have people who are leaving and they would like to see other speakers.
I understand, but I'm dealing with something that's very sensitive to the process.
I
and I
love
wouldn't
it if
bring
you
it
could
up
get
if
to
it
it.
wasn't
Thank
important. So I wanted to know whether or not the feasibility study, similar to the one that was entered into with New Jersey Transit, has also been entered into with DEP and through Dewberry. And if it has it been put on the RBD website? And if it hasn't, has the feasibility study environmental impact statement, contract number 13-002D, May 11, 2015, been placed on the website?
Mr. Weinstein, at the conclusion of the Q&A, we're
No,
going to meet.
I want you to answer that now.
Well, I need to confirm
Why can't you
the
answer it
document,
in
because I
public?
don't
Mr.
know the
Weinstein,
number.
could you hold on, please, and let him answer the question?
I just don't know that number. I want to double check it, and I want to make sure
Well,
the information
all right,
gets posted if it needs to be posted.
Let's assume it wasn't.
Okay.
All of the methodologies that I heard on July 12th regarding the mic are detailed in this report, I'm sorry, in your feasibility study regarding the application of the mic, the input from the North Hudson Sewerage Authority, which we've heard nothing about. We don't know what they've done. And also, finally, when I first got involved in this, I thought we should have a peer review. And the mayor saw the point of that, and she suggested that Stevens be part of that peer review. However, I have seen nothing of any deliverables separate from Dewberry's with regard to what Stevens' position is with regard to Dewberry's determinations of the feasibility of this project.
Well, thank you.
And that's my question. Do you have, and have you put it into the record, those kind of documents regarding Stevens' input to this process?
Okay, thank you. Do you have a response? Hold on.
No,
please.
I think I need to answer some of this. Mr. Weinstein, thank you very much. I do want to follow up with you on those, on what you have in your hand. But secondarily, we have many, many quality assurance contractors that have been engaged in their specialties. We've engaged Stevens through our New Jersey Sea Grant contract to help us perform some quality assurance on the storm surge model. We have Moffitt Nichols helping us on the interior rainwater and CDM Smith. We have some really excellent quality assurance teams that are working through the material, but obviously it's a quality assurance check. Those materials have not been finalized or made public. But we've hired some really excellent teams to make sure what Dewberry's doing meets the minimum standards and the maximum standards to make sure that we're comfortable with the data.
Will they be made public?
That material is going to be made public as part of the record, yes.
Okay, excuse me. We can respond to that at another time. Right now, I'd like to go to our next questioner.
Yes, Latrenda Ross. I am the co-chair of Rebuild by Design. First, I would like to thank all the parties included in this design and the opportunity that we received, the $230 million. I also want to say that I am from the Hoboken Housing Authority. I've been a Housing Authority resident since 1989. And what we experienced during Sandy was unbelievable. We were stuck down there for about 3 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. And so with this money, it will help us to possibly not get flooded as much as we did. This past Monday, I think, when it was raining, was flooded again. Not as bad, but it was flooded. And so we need to do something in order to reduce the flooding in the entire city of Hoboken. There's a question I'm going to ask. Throughout this whole design project, I hope that when the construction takes place, and I think this is through the city, is that you don't forget the people who need jobs. With all these construction companies coming into our city, I hope somewhere along the line that there will be opportunities for people to be employed, even if it's just temporary. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker on this
Thank you very much, Latrenda. That is a requirement of the HUD funding. It's called a Section 3 reporting. Every quarter we have to report that. When we get into the construction phase, the construction contractor will be required to, when hiring a new employee, to reach out to the local one-stop. We'll be working with all the towns to make sure that our hiring procedures comply with HUD's requirements. It's an important part of this project.
Hi, my name is Kirk Gardner. I'm speaking as a private citizen. I'm also a North Hudson Sewage Commissioner. Just want to make that clear. I generally support this process and the project. After seeing the figures for option 1, I'm just going to state my own personal opinion. It looks like it's too expensive, but I'll just leave that at that. That's just my opinion. So that leaves us with options 2 or 3. I realize those options do not necessarily protect everybody directly from flooding. However, being in Hoboken during Sandy, I can tell you that we dodged a bullet because our fire department lost the capacity to fight a fire. And we could have easily seen London or Chicago all over again, where one fire could have gotten out of control and taken out blocks of Hoboken. It could have happened. So that's why I support this project. My question, though, is more specific. Yes, it's how you got to the figure of the benefits. I know that when Hoboken flooded with Sandy, it was about $500 million in damage. So how did you get closer to $1.4 billion?
Yeah, I'll just say that can we talk to you about that afterwards? Because it's probably not a short answer.
Is there a general statement?
Can you do it generally? Can you do a quick answer?
I'm happy with that.
Yeah, sure, that'd be great.
Hi, I would have been up there, but my height intimidates some people. So, but the benefits include avoided damage to structures and contents. There's also avoided surface losses and functional losses. There's also some recent benefits that FEMA has now incorporated, socioeconomic benefits. Imagine the mental stress and anxiety associated with flooding. Yes, there are numbers that now quantify that. And so I can get into, okay, I'm an engineer, I had to read them too, okay? But there's a lot of different benefit categories that go into that, and if you want, I can kind of lay out that for the different events and kind of show you where those benefits come from. But yes, it is a substantially larger number than Sandy, and I understand that. Okay,
thank you.
Quick enough?
So I just wanted to jump in and say, you know, I understand obviously those concerns about the fire department. We actually, the trucks went into the water, so that was a major challenge, and our 3 of our fire stations were all flooded. So that is, that's part of when we think about the benefits. There's benefits for the entire community to do this project because we want obviously our fire department to be able to operate. And we have 3 fire stations that are located in the flood zone, and we need to protect them so that we're all protected, through these events. And so that's an important benefit for everyone to think about that benefits absolutely everyone in our region. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 3 more questions. First one.
Yes. First of all, I want to say that, of course, this project must be done in one way, shape, or form. The very viability of the city, I think, is at stake. I want to thank everybody who has worked so hard on this. But my concern is that there is concern in the mainstream scientific community that
the issue of sea level rise is being underestimated. I just recently read some very mainstream respected scientists estimating that by the end of the century, there may be as much as 5 to 9 meters of sea level rise, which is 16 to 30 feet. Now, how does that tie in with this project? I mean, how far can these defenses be stretched in the case of such, a huge change in our environment?
Thank you.
Okay, I'll take that question. So,
make sure you point out what we are designing to.
yes, yes. So part of our design, we are including sea level rise in our design, flood elevation. We are including an elevation of 2.3 feet, the height of 2.3 feet in our design flood elevation. And 2.34 feet actually corresponds to National Oceanographic Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. They have estimated for the year 2075 intermediate high sea level rise of 2.34 feet. And that's the value that we have used in our design flood elevation. It's for the year 2075. It's 50 years away from after the project is going to be constructed. So we believe that is a good number to be used for this particular project. It's based on, again, NOAA's analysis for the sea level rise. I'll be very curious to hear from you after the Q&A on the 5-meter projection. So we can talk about that after the Q&A. Thank you.
But just wondering, part of my question was, could this project be, somehow expanded?
So there is a flexibility in the project to be elevated. So in maybe in 2100, if the sea level rise is higher than what we have considered so far, there is flexibility in the project to be extended up and beyond. So, all right.
Thank you. Our next questioner.
I'm Jim Vance. We've been talking about once in a 100-year, 1% storm. Sandy was a, once in every 450-year storm? But beyond.
It all depends on where you are. So, according to a report that is published by USGS, we believe it's about 1% storm, Sandy. If you talk with statisticians and other professors, they may have different recurrence interval. Again, it's, every person will have a different opinion. We are following federal guidelines, like Ken mentioned earlier. We have federal funding, so we want to follow the federal guidelines. And according to the report published by the USGS and FEMA, they said for at least in our area or in the study area, it's close to a 1% storm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And our last questioner.
Hi, I'll make it quick. When evaluating these 3 designs, have we considered points of failure, and is there any differences between them? Are they all equally infallible? I can't help but think of the residents of New Orleans and pictures of helicopters dropping things onto levees. Yes, that was a much older design, but is that not a metric because we consider them all equally infallible? When I hear of gates, I can't help but thinking more gates, more points of failure.
That's a very good question. So as part of our design strategy, we wanted to see how to improve the integrity of the system. And the way to improve the integrity of the system is to have more permanent features that improves the quality of life as well as provides the flood risk reduction benefits. The gates are the areas where you have human intervention. So that's the area we wanted to minimize the number of gates for as much as possible in the project area. So if you want to just quantify what's the probably the potential for failure in the whole system, operation of the gates is probably the place where a failure can happen. So it's very important to use the right types of gates and make sure the gates are closed correctly and so forth.
If there's is there any distinction between the 3 designs then? And if there is, shouldn't that be a metric?
Yes,
your
so
table?
in the criteria that we talked about the circulation. In the circulations are based on the number of gate closings we have. So the more number of gates, the more number of potential road closures you're going to have. So it's in the criteria.
Mayor?
Just to follow up on that, I mean, we've heard a lot of concerns about the design and making sure that it's beautiful, and a lot of people have said, well, can't we just build it into the roadbed so that it rises up and that is a possibility, but Raul can probably speak to this more, but the concern with, my understanding is the concern with that kind of a design, although it's, it looks great when there's no flooding, but when there is flooding, it's not as reliable as a system that is retractable and pulls out, that is much more secure. And so that's going to be part of, that workshops and really looking at the design process, and that's very important for people to think about. There's both the design, what it looks like, but there's also what's going to be the strength of those gates. And my understanding is the retractable system is much more reliable and much stronger than something that floats up from the roadbed. Is that correct? Okay.
So before I ask the Commissioner maybe to say a closing remark, I just wanted to remind you up front here, please come and talk to us about the flood risk reduction with Rahul, with finding out more about the NEPA or environmental impact statement process, as well as about the alternatives. And if you want to know more about the project just in general, come up here in the back. Come talk to the people about the socioeconomic issues as well as the built environment. And in the hallway, talk to people about the costs and benefits, about the construction, maintenance, and operations, and environmental impacts. So, Commissioner.
All I want to do is thank the citizens here for their participation tonight, for their previous participation, and their continued participation as we move into the different phases here. Thank you very much.
Mayor.
And I'll just add, I just want to thank everyone so much for being here, and again, a thank you to the DEP, Dewberry, OMA, and SCAPE for all the work that they've done to get us here. Again, there's comment forms if you want to fill out a comment sheet tonight, and they'll be online. Just want to remind everyone of that. Again, thank you very, very much.